for it. Let's do it.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. It is absolutely wonderful to see all these students here. I hope you enjoy the presentation. I'm certainly excited about it. Our featured speaker is Dr. Steve Coughlin. He is an assistant professor in the English and Humanities Department at Chadron State College. And tonight, Dr. Coughlin is going to perform a reading of poems from his book, Another City. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Coughlin?
Hi, everybody. Let's see here. I've turned my phone on silent. I just am using it for the clock. Okay, so let's see. Thanks so much for coming. I want to begin this reading by talking about humility. And I've learned a lot of humility from doing a few readings. And this is how it usually goes. I'm lucky if I get more than 2 people. So this is literally the biggest reading I've had, at least this year. And I was thinking back earlier, I was talking about a reading I did about 3 years ago at a conference. We were doing a presentation. It was a creative writing presentation for Western Literature Association. So I was very excited being around all these people who love writing about the West and Western literature. So me and a couple other people, we put our panel together and we show up and, you know, we wait and it's getting a minute or 2 before the reading and nobody's there. We're like, oh, no. And then finally one person comes in and takes a seat. We're like, all right, let's do it. And I was the first one up. And I go to the podium and I stand there and I say, thanks so much for coming. And then he got up and left. So I've been shut out many a time. It's thanks so much for coming. Shawn, thanks so much for putting this together, the Grades Lecture Series. Really appreciate it. What a wonderful thing this is for a community and to show what our faculty are all about here. So thanks so much for coming here. And I see that there are students here who are probably getting some extra credit right now, so good for you too. All right, my plan was to read a bunch of new pieces and then a short story, but then I realized that I'm not going to read the short story and I probably should read a couple poems from my book. So I will read a couple poems from the book in a few minutes, but I want to start off talking about where I'm at right now. The first 3 pieces I'm going to read are poems that are probably going to sit in the book I'm working on right now. The book I'm working on right now, as anyone who I think has ever written anything, is still years away. But it's exciting because, let's see, my book, Another City, came out in May, and there's always that great anxiety, at least for me, I'm a very anxious person. When the book came out, I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? I gotta write another book now. And the summer went by and I really struggled getting any pieces or threads, but over the last few months, I've really been hitting a good writing stride. So I want to read some of those new pieces. And the book that I'm working on has a working title. This isn't going to be the actual title, but it's going to be the title that I'm kind of give myself a metaphor to work towards. It's called, I think this is a good title, but no one ever likes my titles. But the title is Adventures with Leo. Adventures, Leonardo DiCaprio? No? Adventures with Leo? Okay. And there's going to be 2 epigraphs I've been kind of thinking about. An epigraph is a quote that often goes at the beginning of a poem, sometimes at the beginning of books. And there are 2 epigraphs that I'm kind of working on right now that I'm kind of staring me. One is a quote by Saul Bellow from Henderson the Rain King. I just haven't found it yet. So the book Henderson the Rain King is just a wild, wild book that if you haven't read, you should. And then there's another book from a singer-songwriter who was very popular in the 90s. I think they're still popular. Do the Counting Crows, does anyone listen to the Counting Crows still? All right, 3 of us, 4 of us. To you people who have never heard of the Counting Crows, who are under a certain age, Adam Duritz is the lead singer of them, and he has a song called The Rain King, which is based on the book by Saul Bellow, Henderson the Rain King. And he has a quote that I'd also put at the beginning of this, which is, after all the dreaming, I come home again. So let's begin. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to read tonight is called Preferable. I always feel like I need to apologize when I'm reading my work. There's not a lot of rhyming. It just doesn't, I can't hear it. And my lines are pretty long. It's kind of conversational. So, Preferable. I admit it was me who reached to the far back of the Safeway cooler to select the half-gallon carton of low-fat milk because it featured 3 extra days before expiration. And yes, I was the shopper who invested several minutes trying to decide between half-frozen avocados. Did you say my new tennis shoes glow with a blandness that lacks imagination? Did you say I am even more predictable after signing up for online banking? But what if I didn't turn the car around when I was 20, middle of the night, briefly considering escaping my Boston life for the possibilities of Hollywood? Look at that me surfing Malibu waves, a shamrock tattoo on each of my chiseled shoulders, my muscled stomach firm as an iron shield as my part-time personal assistant, Hernando Champagne, watches me perform a perfectly executed double aerial barrel roll. Did you say you've never heard of a double aerial barrel roll? Did you even know I am considering an intriguing cameo in the new Terrence Malick film? And did you hear I assisted Terrence with several key changes in the script as we ate dinner at Chispaca? Yeah, that was us sharing an appetizer of marinated baby artichokes when Martin Scorsese entered and once again informed us of his latest adventures with Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, Marty, I laughed. None of us even care about your latest adventures with Leo. And if you were privileged enough to see me through the tinted windows of that stretch luxury limousine, you would have discovered I am just one of 5 trusted members of the Winona Ryder Golden Ticket entourage. But even that me wants to be home by 9:30. When Winona taps my knee, her hair again styled into a tussle shag as it was in the 1994 film Reality Bites, and asks if I want to accompany them back to her Sunset Boulevard mansion for an early evening swim in her recently renovated saltwater swimming pool, I still look down at my watch and say, maybe next time. Preferable, my closet of monochrome button-up shirts. Preferable to my 3 indistinguishable pairs of beige khakis. But what about the other me who moved to San Francisco at 25? Did you know I was hired by Italian fashion guru Robert Cavalli to wander the city modeling his latest designs? Did you see me in a cream white single-breasted blazer with dual back vents sauntering along Seacliff Avenue? Look at how I enter a new favorite bar in North Beach. Look at the table of women overwhelmed by the aura of my presence. Still, after just a few days, when the bartender with neon purple hair begins pouring my midshipman top of the hops IPA with accompanying shot of Uncle Jack's Turkey Vulture bourbon before I even order, I choose to stay home, worn down by the city's unyielding rush. Preferable, watching a baseball game on television. Preferable, these blue basketball shorts, white t-shirt, this half-finished bag of potato chips. Look at how I resist going to the Old Main for a single beer. Watch how I stay in my living room as another car, windows down, speeds westward. Thank you. I encourage you to clap after every no, I'm just kidding. So Frank O'Hara, anyone ever hear of Frank O'Hara? Great writer, very popular in the 1960s. Part of this writing school called the New York School. And obviously that means he was a New York writer. And he wrote kind of these very urban poems, whatever that means. And he has this one poem called Steps. And it's a beautiful poem. It's a love poem to New York City, among other things. So that's called Steps. So I wrote a poem called Strides, which attempts to be a love poem to the West, but I think it's a little confused. Do we live in the West?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, good. This poem works then. Strides. How unpredictably pleasant you are today, Northwest Nebraska. Like tough guy John Wayne singing Red Wing in The Shootist. Here I am bundled in my Calvin Klein winter coat, prepared for your late March bluster, and there you are, more appealing than Jane Russell's revealing bodice in The Outlaw. How can I not adore your miles of empty grassland, your Badlands rugged as a John Ford film? I could walk for weeks in dry creeks without encountering a single Walmart greeter. Did you know of the years I lived in an eastern city? The nights I circled the same block of tenements, radio broken, unable to find a parking space? How could I not indulge in your nothingness? The idea of riding horseback with John Wayne, tall in the saddle, masculinity flowing like whiskey. To hell with watching Once Upon a Time in the West, just me and John Wayne and you, Northwest Nebraska, my home on the edge of the West. Our silence impressive as any of your wind-worn buttes. Still, for lunch, instead of John Wayne offering me another hardtack biscuit, wouldn't it be better if hidden in one of your wavy hills was a Cracker Barrel restaurant? Wouldn't it be preferable for me and the Duke to tie our horses to a hitching post and recline in rocking chairs to eat the big boy country breakfast? And after my third cup of coffee, it's back to your endless prairie. Repetitive, really, as searching for a parking space. So after another hour, why not surprise me with a tumbleweed blowing, swinging door saloon, Wild West town featuring a newly constructed Barnes & Noble bookstore? Instead of actually experiencing your sandhills, let Willer Cather sing their brilliance. And when John Wayne says, "Pilgrim, we're burning daylight," then, Northwest Nebraska, I will jingle jangle back into you. How I will look upon the distant shadows of Crow Butte, so wild and long. How I will feel compelled to bound across you with giant strides. And after John Wayne and I check into our room at the Best Western Hotel, oh God, Northwest Nebraska, how wonderful it will be for the both of us to unwind in our separate queen-size beds, a newly purchased 10-gallon hat on my head, and watch an early evening double feature of My Darling Clementine and the Oxbow Incident. Or maybe The Wild Bunch and the Gunfighter. Or perhaps High Noon and a Fistful of Dollars as we drink too much whiskey and smoke too many cigarillos and marvel, as if by firelight, about everything we love about the West. No, seriously, stop. You don't have to clap after. Has anyone ever experienced It? Not the book. Have you ever read? Oh my gosh, Stephen King's The It. Don't ever read that. I remember as a kid watching that movie on TV. It was horrifying. It. So I tried to, there's a couple stories that go with this. One, I have this friend, Bill Travers. He's not my friend. He was my friend in high school. And Bill and I spent a lot of time hanging out, which means we just drove around our town doing nothing. And Bill tracked me down, because I'm not on Facebook, so Bill tracked me down last year, and he sent me this email. It was really kind and sweet, asking about how I'm doing, and I was really touched. And I was like, Bill, it's so great to hear from you. And then I told him about this poem I wrote that he was in. And he was like, that is so cool. Could you send me the poem? But the truth was, the poem was terrible, and I couldn't share it to anybody. So I just didn't respond and haven't responded for a year. But I did write a poem, another poem, with Bill in it. And my goal was to send this poem to Bill. But then, I'm not kidding, I wrote it, and then I kind of forgot that I wrote it. And I only remembered last week that about 10 months ago, I wrote this poem for Bill. So Bill, if you're watching, this is for you. It's called It, and it is, so you know that moment where life makes sense, and you're feeling good about everything, and you're not worried, and you're in the moment, and you know how seldom that is and how quick it goes. So I wanted to write a poem called It, where everything kind of aligns. And I have an epigraph, just like my book in progress has an epigraph, or a couple epigraphs. I have an epigraph to this poem. It's by Lou Reed. Has anyone ever heard of Lou Reed? Oh, man. Okay. Lou Reed, former lead singer of Velvet Underground, and the Nico album with the banana, the Andy Warhol album. So there's this great song he has called Romeo and Juliet off the album called New York. Lou Reed passed away a couple years ago, but he's always been one of my favorite singer-songwriters. And this is an epigraph from his song Romeo and Juliet, and this is what it says. And something flickered for a minute, and then it vanished and was gone. It. How can I describe the arrival of It in Bill's Grand Jeep Cherokee during a June night in 1997? We drove away from my white house filled with my aging parents, but for us, there was the swirling promise of Nantasket's shoreline. It assuring us that all the girls in tight shorts, their laughter floating like the sound of waves, would finally notice as we drove by. It was the same It which appeared to me and Tamra years later at Massimino's in Boston. It suggested we order the chocolate truffle for dessert. It, in the form of 2 more glasses of Sangiovese, insisted every square inch of the city, each red brick on the Freedom Trail, was only meant for us. I imagine it at the Louvre, revealing itself like the Madonna to a tourist who witnesses in the wedding at Cana something more than just a masterpiece. Bill turned up Toad the Wet Sprocket's All I Want because it stated this was the only song the universe wanted to hear. I waved to the girl in gray Chuck Taylors because it assured me she would actually wave back. And always the addictive chase of it. My father ran 5 times a week hoping to reclaim its elusive high. Bill again played All I Want, and we dutifully sang The Air Outside So Soft Is Saying Everything, but we were driving home, and it was further away than any of the girls we had stared at. And where is it now? In the lines to some poem I'll never be able to write? My father, too old to run, walks 2 hours a day. I stay up each night searching for another new show on television. And still my father wanders the rooms of his house. It gone from those nights he stays up after 9. Gone too from the bedroom that once contained his wife. My father counted the minutes left in his shift just to return to their bed. How he whispered her name to see if she had waited. How her body turned toward his. It no longer promising that this is all he'll ever need. Well, I was going to read a short story, but we won't. It was a good short story. It's about Halloween. It takes place in October, as Halloween often does. I was also going to talk about the Dixie Chicks song, Goodbye Earl. Do you know the Dixie Chicks? What a weird song. Alas, we'll do different things. I'm going to read a couple poems from my book. Let's do Helen's Barroom. Helen's Barroom. My father explains how the woman whose mouth slacks open in a coma, whose hospital bed rests in the middle of our living room, was different in 1967 while dancing at Helen's Barroom. An old man, he forks the final remnants of day-old crab rangoon and comments upon a car driving too fast outside. And this everyday observation is okay, because more than anything, I need to drift with that speeding car that 50 years ago would have been driving intently toward the town's only bar. The quiet woman in the passenger seat, so this first date story goes, wore a green dress, and the driver, hair buzzed into a flat top, delighted in Patsy Cline on the radio. The night must have promised a lifetime of such nights. 100 years of that gravel barroom parking lot crunching under the excited steps of brown shoes, white heels. A beer-soaked wooden floor. The world was Eddie Arnold on the juke. Her fingers promised to flutter forever on her beer bottle between songs. That young couple, for those few hours, the envy of each drunk shadow on a bar stool. And me now. But my father, grown weary of conversation, finishes his paper plate of microwave food and retreats to the silence of his bedroom. And my mother, with a machine pumping air into her lungs, keeps drifting further from us. Along with those nights, she still rode through town. Windows down, brown hair blowing. The darkness ahead of them lost in neon glow. I was meant to be a musician, but I have no rhythm, and I'm tone deaf. So instead, I write poems, predominantly about musicians. guess it's my go-to. It's kind of horrifying. Okay, so do you know Sloop John B by the Beach Boys? Okay, that's a great song. It's actually not by the Beach Boys. It's a traditional cover. But this song talks about or quotes the Beach Boys, Sloop John B. And the chorus to Sloop John B is, I want to go home, let me go home. This is the worst trip I've ever been on. You know, Matt, if I'd known you were going to be here, there is a poem I have that needs a singer, and I would have had you do it. I mean, Dr. Everson, sorry. Okay, winter refrain. Let's be honest. It snowed every day. 8:07 a.m., and you scraping ice from your windshield, that thankless circle you stared through all winter, when the same flake touched your shoulder like a secret. Each day, you drove to work, wind from the west, while she packed her lilac bathrobe and took the collected poems of W.B. Yeats. That same sunset purple Trans Am passed you on the inside lane, and when you finally sat at your desk, walls the color of rain, you listened always to Sloop John B. Let me go home, you sang. Let me go home. But each day, she took the bottle of late harvest Riesling, that framed photograph of Elvis with lamb chop sideburns, every fire-brown brick in the fireplace. During break, you ate a tuna fish sandwich and carrot sticks while she took the black table lamp you bought together at Pier 1. 5:32 p.m., and you driving through 8 inches of snow singing, hoist up the John B. sail, see how the mainsail sets. But each day the front door was gone from its frame, the frame gone from your blue-shingled house. She had taken that first date to Olive Garden, the butter pecan ice cream cone you shared in Paragon Park. Let's be honest, it was a blizzard, even if no one else noticed. And each night you walked the yard searching for the kitchen, for her rain cloud-colored sneakers in the hallway. There was nothing, just your voice lost in furious snow. So let's say about 10 more minutes, and then we'll feel like we've put in a good day's work. Oh, maybe a couple more. Okay. So that's a poem about lost love or failed love. I want to do a poem about a misunderstanding of what a relationship is. I don't know if anyone's ever had that before. So it's called Special Recognition. I think the speaker in this poem believes that his love is unique and deserves special recognition, unlike everyone else's love. The original title was Economics of Love, because I wrote it during an economic downturn, but I've since retitled it to Special Recognition. Driving these streets of, I've read this poem a couple times and it's never read well live, so I stopped doing it, but I'm amongst friends. Okay. Driving the streets of Boston, I keep telling Nora, this city hasn't earned our love. I'm insisting Boston has not adequately considered how dollar bills would dance out of wallets, parade out of purses, if we were only hired to make weekly public appearances. And even as Nora refuses to respond, I complain that economists have never fully researched how cities might flourish from our presence, how our love could renovate the dilapidated houses of Little Rock, our kisses rebuild the abandoned warehouses of Boise. I'm suggesting Savannah would be more than willing to supply us with an antebellum mansion if we only allowed local residents to watch us slow dance each Sunday on the village green. I want Nora to appreciate, as she cruises the radio dial, as she lights another Marlboro menthol, how within days of our arrival, Grand Forks would become the passion-pulsing Paris of North Dakota. Let economists write their books. They're simply men who have never been kissed by lips that burn everything they touch. Let them go on cable TV to explain theories overlooking the obvious. Whenever Nora's morning gray eyes gaze upon me, whenever the tips of her fingers touch the yearning follicles on my neck, companies within a 10-mile radius rise 20 points on the stock exchange. Nora needs to know, even as she covers her ears with her hands, that our kind of love deserves special recognition. A free hazelnut coffee or low-fat cranberry muffin from every Dunkin' Donuts in the greater Boston area. stopped at a downtown traffic light, I tell Nora it's time for Santa Fe to consider the mystery of us. For our love to be viewed by each inhabitant from the fiery peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. And even as Nora unbuckles her seatbelt, as she places her hand on the door handle, I insist she understand how any couple on any street in any other city in all of America would provide her and me with countless signed checks simply to watch us share a bowl of Cherry Garcia ice cream on the living room couch. I'm saying the time has arrived. She needs to say yes. I'm begging Nora to stay in the car because, in only moments, I'm more than convinced, this feverish red light before us will turn, the break I've been waiting for, into an unstoppable, ATM withdrawable, river-flowing green. So this book is my dissertation. For those of you who are going to graduate school, you'll have to do a dissertation if you want to get your PhD, I think. And my dissertation advisor is really tough, and I love him for it. He always tells me that my poems aren't very good. And then I cry and talk to my wife, and I fix things. And his name's Mark, and Mark's a really brilliant guy. And Mark told me that this poem is not very good, and I shouldn't keep it in my book. But I told Mark he was wrong. Bob Wrigley, who I got my master's degree with, told me this is the best poem you've ever written. So there you go. It's not consistent. It's called Adam's Thirst. Have you ever heard of Adam from Adam and Eve? Okay then. All right. It's actually, I've grown to be suspicious of love poems, but this is a love poem. They're a little too sappy sometimes. This is really sappy. Okay. Oh, I wrote it for my wife. Adam's Thirst. How each day ends with silence. Adam and Eve washing dishes, like us now. How she, like you, wore size 9 slippers. How he searched for words to describe the way she scrubbed each spoon. Tonight, you're reading National Geographic, and I find myself, like Adam, without a definition for this thirst. In the bathroom, you brush your hair, stroke after stroke, and I search for a phrase that goes beyond burning chestnut blonde. How Eve, like you, walked light as a ghost. How each night she ate 7 cherries on the couch. How Adam climbed into bed unable to explain the softness of her exhalations. How I watch you sleep. How in this darkness I lean over you, as he did her when words were young, to watch your shoulder rise, now fall. And from the time when history was small enough for 2, Adam's voice reaches me. What is this, he asks. What is this? God? See, now I'm self-conscious because that was a lesser clap than the other poems.
We're stunned.
Stunned. How did that guy get a book published? Anyone can do it. It's the American dream. Okay. So when I was 12 years old, I was on this baseball team that goes into the Little League playoffs and World Series. You all know. You know how it's on ESPN now, those Little League playoffs and everything. Well, we had a team, and the team was really good, actually. And I was actually on the team, which was shocking to everyone, including myself. And so I was on the team, and we were at the game before this. So we were at the regionals. If we won that game, we go to the Northeast Finals, meaning you go a step further. And the Northeast Finals, even then, were televised on ESPN. So I thought if my team won, we would be on ESPN, which we were, and we did. But let me back up. So playing baseball was great, and where I grew up, baseball was huge. My father, unfortunately, worked a lot. He worked a lot of hours. He worked 2 jobs. Got up at 4, didn't get home till 11, most days, Monday through Friday. And he worked weekends as well. So he never got to go to my games. And I was always a little frustrated by that. You know, you don't get to see your dad. You want to see your dad. He's your father. And he was an angry man anyway, and he didn't talk a lot. He was always quiet, probably because he was sleep deprived. And he was kind of like one of those people that you wanted home, but every time he came home, you wanted him to leave. You know what I mean? Or you hear his car in the driveway, and you kind of like, oh no, you know, because he might come home angry. He was also an alcoholic, so there was also that element. So, so we were in that game, and we weren't even in. We were far out of Massachusetts. We were like in Connecticut or something, and we're playing the game, and my dad surprised me, and he showed up to the game, and I was the first. I played second base. I was the leadoff hitter, and I saw my dad. He showed up on. He was like a big grandstand then. And I saw him. And he was just sitting there quietly all by himself. My mother was there, but I didn't sit with her. And I saw him. I was very excited about this. And then the game started. And I got into the batter's box, and the first pitch went right under my chin, and I dove back. And the kid was throwing very, very hard. The next pitch, I was not so lucky, and I didn't get out of the way. And it hit me right here. And it shattered my cheekbone. And I fell to the ground unconscious. And when I came to, they had me turned on my side because of the blood. So I was unconscious, but they didn't want me to choke on my blood. And I had no idea what was going on. And I was just kind of looking around. I didn't even cry because I was just kind of stunned. And then all of a sudden, the waves parted, and my father came up to me, and I looked at him, and all of a sudden I felt all the pain. And I just started bursting out crying. And I was just a puddle of blood, broken cheekbone. And my dad, who never said anything when I was growing up, bent over and said, "You're okay." And he picked me up, put me in the car, and he drove me home. It's called The New Physics. My father was dead when he came to Napa for a visit. We carried in his luggage, and he sat down to have a slice of Tamara's chilled strawberry pie. We drank coffee. He talked about work. And the next day, we went for a drive along the Mendocino coast. This isn't the first of my father's appearances. And Larry's been offering his opinion that it has something to do with space-time relativity. He says, my father has an irrational way of understanding the universe and has been living for years in 4-dimensional reality. But theories like this only go so far in explaining how my father has been waking without the slightest hint of a heartbeat. For over 20 years, he's been disappearing for months, returning with nothing but missing teeth and scars. Local papers have speculated that perhaps my father's ability to defy death is proof of Penrose's black hole theory. Jim says in 1957, the many worlds interpretation predicted the possibility of someone like my father accomplishing this sort of feat. Even Bell's theorem, Jim says, which only recently has been received by science, suggests life and death are a matter of perspective. But when my father came to Napa, it was the middle of the summer. We grilled hamburgers in the backyard and opened a bottle of Sonoma Chardonnay. That night, Cameron and Stacy stopped by sometime after 2, and once again, it all came back to subatomic particles and Max Planck, and for a few moments, they shared a heated debate over the supposed shortcomings of S-matrix. Come morning, Cameron still couldn't let go of the quantum mechanics involved in von Neumann's disproof of the distributive law. The night before my father left, I took him to the cabin at Clear Lake. As evening came, we sat on the pier eating cheese and drinking Sierra Nevadas. Through the silence of our conversation, I stared into darkness, listening for breaths that would not come. My father's risen above the failure of his heart to beat and his blood to flow. He's risen above kidney failure and throat cancer and what once seemed to be the irrefutable laws of science. And it was like this, that my father was dead, as he raised a hand like a child and waved to stars galaxies away, and which have been sending for countless generations these droplets of the most quiet light. All right, and the last poem, right? Do we make it? Great, yeah, I'm almost going long now. Okay, the last poem, we're at 35 minutes. I am not old. But if life were like a roller coaster hill, right? I feel like in terms of like I'm just starting to enter middle age. I don't think I'm there yet. I don't know when middle age begins, but I'm insisting I'm not there yet. But I realized the other day when I was teaching and my students were talking about things I could not even understand their cultural references, I realized maybe I'm not youthful or as a member of the youth society anymore. Maybe I've been kind of like eased out of the doorway. So this is a poem, a direct address poem there. It's called an apostrophe poem. It's a direct address poem to youth. It makes references to a lot of bands that I loved in my youth, like Weezer, who has a song called My Name is Jonas. It talks about, there's references to Winona Ryder. I think I had a big crush on her growing up. You know, but here's the thing that's sweet about me. So a lot of people would have like, do you know what I had hanging on my bedroom walls? So yeah, it was a picture of Winona Ryder, but it was Winona Ryder from The Crucible, okay? So she was dressed in the Crucible garb, okay? So that's what happens when you're raised Catholic, okay? It messes with your head. Derrida. He's a philosopher of sorts, a theorist of sorts. Bernini's David, as in David and Goliath. The David's a young guy, you know, with the slingshot. You all know what solo cups are, I bet. All right, here we go. So this is it. My last poem. It's called Final Encore. I did not know, youth, what to do when I had you. It was as if every moment was Friday night, and there was no point if I was not driving down Liberty Street in my father's newest used car incredibly fast. Now, it's like we are in an emptying ballroom under antique chandeliers, and you are that beautiful woman in a wrinkled dress, a wilted corsage on your wrist, as I watch the band members return their guitars to their cases, hoping for one final encore. It feels good when you lead me into the hallway, because this must be one of many well-lit hallways in this 15,000 square foot mansion, which must be high on a bluff above the ocean. Though the walls no longer feature posters of Wilco and Winona Ryder, at least on the polished tile floor, a black boombox still blares Weezer's My Name is Jonas. When we descend the staircase with a replica of Bernini's David at the bottom, and you point toward the heated indoor swimming pool just beyond the grand marble foyer, it bothers me less, these 20-year-old bodies, like the body I no longer have, than the attention they take for granted. The dignified butler, hands clasped behind his back, maintaining order with occasional nods. Footmen scurrying like ants to refill empty solo cups with cheap domestic beer. Retrieving the beach ball stuck between lounge chairs. Hand on my shoulder, you guide me past the billiard room, where teenage boys surrounded by cans of Mountain Dew and empty bags of potato chips play 8-ball. Graduate students in the study, sitting around a long oak table, their minds still burning with a desire to decipher Derrida, as the antique grandfather clock, its long silver pendulum swinging, announces the hour. And how can it not be late? Late enough for you to lead me from your mansion to this veranda, which features several Adirondack chairs and a pleasant view of the ocean, and where a distant foghorn calls as the lights of the horizon wave gently, and where you, sweet youth, one last time, rest your head upon my shoulder. All righty, gang, that's that. Do I do questions, or am I supposed to say to them? I don't know what questions you could possibly have. Sure, anyone got any questions, or do we want to go home?
That's unloaded.
All right, well, it was that awkward silence, and you filled it. We could have called it, okay.
Do you revise much?
You're just doing that to prove a point. Of course I do. Yeah, I'm an obsessive reviser. You know, the biggest leap a young writer can have, I think, with the exception of the poet Sharon Olds, every writer I've ever read about, encountered, or seen in an interview says they obsessively revise. And really and truly, the only way that you're going to make that leap is when you value that. First drafts can be really good. First drafts very, very seldom are publishable. And really what we're trying to do with the first draft is get something good going so that we can build towards something better. So I'm an obsessive reviser. For me, the writing process is, I tell these stories to my students all the time. Like, I have a very good friend who's a lot more successful than me at writing, and I'm not bitter about it. But he tells his students, because he's like the perfect teacher. You know those people, they're just better than you and you resent it? He's the perfect teacher. So he tells his students, when I write my poems, it's like I'm just playing with lines. That sounds so fun when you say it like that. For me, I get up each morning and write for 3 hours, and I'm just praying for the 3 hours to pass as soon as they can, so I can go on and live my life. Because it's not playing, for me it's not playing with lines, I'm wrestling with lines. Now, I want to finish that by saying that, for me, is my experience with the first draft. I wrestle hard with first drafts. They take me forever to write, okay? Now, the thing that I enjoy, the play I have when I'm playing, is when I'm revising. I could revise all day. I love revising, because I don't have that anxiety of, do you have a finished draft? Now it's just like, I've got something. I've got that nibble on my fishing line, right? I know I got something good. Now I'm just making it better. That's the fun part. So my friend, he's just playing with lines. I'm wrestling with lines. But eventually, when I'm revising, all the fun's happening then. So that's what I would say. Yeah?
You mentioned music a lot in your poems.
Probably too much. Mark, now I'm thinking of my dissertation advisor. He would probably call me out on that. But anyway, yeah.
Do you listen to music while you write? And if you do, what 90s bands are included?
So when I started out in graduate school, I would go, I love coffee shops. I don't know if you love I love coffee shops. I was so excited when I came in for a campus interview and I saw the Bean Broker. I was like, yeah, I want this job. And then I met the faculty and the students, and I knew I wanted it even more. So I was an obsessive reviser at coffee shops, so whatever would be on the radio, I'd be, you know, I didn't have those, whatever they call things in your ears. But I would listen. But here was a weird ritual that has nothing to do with your question. But I would buy, I remember this when I was getting my master's in anatomy. I'd buy a cinnamon roll and place it right in front of me. And the rule was I had to write for 2 hours before I could eat the cinnamon roll. And that's actually how I wrote. And my friend, who I was talking about earlier, told his students about that, and they voted that that was the strangest approach to writing they'd ever heard. Now when I write in silence. I know a lot of people love music and find it, you know, that generates them and gets their thoughts. It's a distraction to me. Anytime I'm in a coffee shop now and I hear like a song I love, I stop writing and just listen to the song and stare out the window. That's what I do. So I try not to listen to music when I write or have anything. I just try to, now I sit in my office and it's not even decorated. I just have a chair and a table. It's kind of depressing. And I write for 3 hours. That's my rule. You got to write for 3 hours a day. And I still love 90s music, though. We were talking about this the other day. It's funny how, like, I look back at a lot of those 90s bands. I'm like, they're so much better than I realized. Like Nirvana, I didn't like Nirvana at the time. Because to me, it was a rivalry between Nirvana and R.E.M., and I chose R.E.M. But now I'm like, oh, Nirvana's pretty good, man. And Pearl Jam, they're pretty good. So, not a really good answer, but yeah, that's what I got for you. Yeah?
Steve, in regard to music, when you listen to a piece from the 90s or 80s, whenever it might have been, does it bring you back in time? Can it put you in a place and help you to write?
Oh, definitely. There was another poem that I was going to bring, but I just forgot to print it out, called, what's that? Okay, there's the movie There's that movie, Hungry Eyes. What movie was Hungry Eyes in? It was in some 80s movie. Hungry Eyes. She got hungry eyes. You know that song?
Dirty Dancing.
Dirty Dancing. Thank you. And my sister listened to Dirty Dancing. No, not the movie. Although she like my mother wouldn't let her watch it. You know, it was too dirty. But she would listen to Hungry Eyes over for like 8 years one summer. You know, and yeah. So I wrote a poem. Hearing that song brought me back to that very moment. And I wrote a poem about it, and it was actually got a sing-along component. It's not a very good poem though, but yeah, it definitely brings me back, and movies bring me back. So you know, there's all these different schools out here, and that's what's wonderful. You know, a lot of people say this is the worst. You know, that poetry doesn't matter anymore. This is the heyday of poetry. With graduate school programs, there's more people reading and publishing poetry than ever. Okay, so this is a great time to be a poet, And my school is all about pop culture. We love pop culture. You know what I mean? The poets I love, like Denise Duhamel, Mark Halliday, you know, they're just, George Bulgari I kind of like too. Like, they're all pop culture. So like they love talking about the music that they listen to. They love talking about the movies. I never related, I kind of relate a little more the older I get, but like I never related to, you know, the poets who only talked about high art all the time, right? I was like, that's not me. I love the Boston Red Sox. I love Bruce Springsteen. And I love watching bad TV. And I want to be able to talk about those things in my art. And it was very nice because I've discovered all of these artists doing those things that have, you know, they're writing fantastically interesting poems, and they're living in a world that I understand. Now, I'm not judging the high art or anything like that. I also value that a lot. But you know, my reference points are, you know, hey, look, when I was a kid, my parents were sweet, but they also had 5 kids, and I watched 8 hours of TV a day. You know, I didn't read, so you know, that came later. You know, that came later. So there was hope for me, but it came later. And so yeah, I love pop references. I love all those things that bring me back. Yeah. The problem is I can become overly. The problem is if you start making too many references, it becomes an insider's game, right? So anyone know Rick Moranis? Rick Moranis, Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. The movie I think of, or I Shrunk the Kids. There's many of them. There's this Rick Moranis poem, a story. No, Ghostbusters. So I wrote this poem about Rick Moranis. And he was just like the ultimate dirt nerd. You know what I mean? He was the loser of all losers. But here's the thing that I love about Rick Moranis. Rick Moranis one day quit, and he never came back. He quit, and he never came back. And I wrote this poem that was trying to get at that idea of what does it mean to just quit. It was about Rick Moranis. But Mark, who I've talked about, who's just in my head all the time now, said it was too much of an insider poem. People who didn't know the Rick Moranis story couldn't relate. And I've been trying to revise that poem for years to find a way to make it both relate to people who know Rick Moranis and people who don't know Rick Moranis can also relate. So that's the danger of it too. Alrighty, I think we've put in a good day's work. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. This was great.